Hi guys, I would like to have an open conversation about tumble dryers. As you will see, tumble dryers have different type of controls. Some of them are electromechanical, some of them are digital pads. So let's today talk about these touch pads. You'll buy a tumble dryer, it's got a lot of programs. You'll set up the program, you'll plug it into your socket. You'll put the clothing inside. Then obviously you'll close the lid and you are drying your clothing. Now you will see on a display the time, and when the program will end, you will remove your clothing and you will smile because you'll be pretty satisfied. And this is a very happy scenario. But now let's repeat the scenario. You have the tumble dryer for a while. You will plug it in a socket. The program starts to show. You will choose a program. Then you will open the panel, put the clothing inside, wet clothing obviously, and you'll close the panel, and then the system will start its cycle. It shows you 120 minutes, then it drops to 60, and instantly you'll have an error. And what can you do? You can check the water tank to see maybe it's full of water. You can check the filter down below, which is in front of the evaporator, or you can check the filter inside. You'll open the door, see maybe that filter is blocked. There's nothing you can do, then you call a technician. Well, technician will come to your premises, will plug it, you'll end up with the same situation, 60 seconds, and an error will show. You don't know why, you don't know. Now, you see there's a lot of parts in this tumble dryer, especially the heat pump one. You got the tumble dryer, the heat pump, the filters, the printed circuit board, and so on. Take a couple of time with technician, the disappointing ones with no knowledge, and then the dangerous one, the gold diggers. Technicians come to your home, they tell you everything you want to hear, and they take you some money, promise you they'll come back. There are a lot of Pinocchio teachers in this world, and these Pinocchio teachers are creating Pinocchio engineers. A good technician will mirror all parts from your tumble dryers. They will be in his head. He can mirror everything. He understands the process. He understands how the tumble dryer works. His tumble dryers have a lot of parts like driving cylinder, moisture probe, motors, primary filters, heat pump, electrical power supply cable, control board, water tank, and the belt. It's good to remember all these parts. Now, this is the heat pump. This is a pump is like a part in a part. We have the compressor, the condenser, the evaporator, the secondary filters. Also, you have the water pump, which removes the condensed water from the drip tray. So here's your tumble dryer. That's the way it looks inside. You have the refrigeration process underneath, and then you have the rest of the part. A smart tumble dryer, which I haven't seen in the market, will be like that. You press the start, and the tumble dryer starts to assess all the parts before you start the cycle, one by one. Like the tank, the motor, the compressor in this case, the condensed water pump, the filter, if this well fitted on its location, and the other filter which is in front of the evaporator. Unfortunately, I haven't seen. They don't make them so precise. So if everything is okay, now the tumble dryer will start the cylinder. The motor will start, will turn the cylinder, and the fan in front will start to move the air through the system. At this stage, I have clothing into that cylinder, but because the air moves and the compressor, the heat pump doesn't work, you just move the air and do nothing. And you see on the right hand side, in front of the cylinder, there are two blades. I will explain to you what they for. They're normally inside beyond the filter where the clothing are. The clothing attaches these two probes, and that's why the intelligent sensors know that your clothing are wet. But I will explain to you in detail, more in detail, how this works. So Now the cylinder spinning, the fan is circulating there, but this is enough? No, it's not enough, because the air which circulated, it is wet. The humidity in the air is very high, so this air is not removing the moisture from your clothing. To remove the moisture from your clothing, the heat pump must be instructed by the printed circuit board to work. Now the compressor start work. So see, now the compressor, which is painted with green, is starting, and this is kind of refrigeration and air conditioning process, but the heat is recovered within itself. I'll explain to you how it works. So now you see the evaporator on the right hand side, painted in blue, is getting very cold, and the condenser in the middle, which is an orange color, is getting hot. This is like a refrigeration process, but you don't get rid of the heat outside. You need that heat, and I'll explain to you why do you need that heat. Now, after you start this process, you see the air which circulates inside the cylinder. I use many colors to show you how this is working. So, the air comes from the cylinder, warm and very moist. Now it drops the moisture and is getting cold where the evaporator it is. You see now the water underneath, and then it is reheated by the condenser and it goes back into the cylinder. So why this is happen? The air goes from the cylinder moist and warm, goes through the filters, goes to the evaporator where the evaporator is very cold. It loses the moisture, but as a side effect, it's getting very cold. Then the air, it is reheated by the condenser. And the air which is dry and warm goes back into the cylinder and absorbs the moisture from your clothing. It's simple as such, guys. So my intention is to bring the air into the cylinder warm and dry. Warm to warm up the clothing so the water will vaporize, and dry so the air can absorb the moisture. And then when it goes out, it goes into the evaporator, and the moisture from there will condense onto the drip tray. And you'll see on the left hand side, you have a red pump. The pump just removed the moisture, and you see now you have on the top in the tank you have the water which has been removed from the drip tray. So this is the cycle. It's simple as such. Some engineers came to my home with thermometer telling me, look, the air is warm, the air is warm. But the air is not enough to be warm. The air must be warm and dry. Now you see the cycle is 59 minutes. How the machine know I still have 59 minutes, or because the machine got a counter inside? I will explain to you how how the system works. But now I hope you understood how the pump works. Look, you see the red pump on the left hand side to the bottom is working now. Now this pump works because it's removing the water from the drip tray, and it pushed that water onto the tank. That's why you have the water into the tank. And when the water is not into the drip tray anymore, the pump stops. And I'll explain to you. There's a floating switch. When the tank fills with water, the floating switch is floating and enables the pump. It sends a signal to the printed circuit board, and the printed circuit board enables the pump. You will learn about this floating switch. It's got a tiny magnet inside, and when that little donut reaches the magnet area, a signal it conveys back into the printed circuit board. But now let's talk about this Enigma smart sensors. Big deal. The system have a counter. It counts 120 minutes, and this is always resetted if the clothing are wet. But how that happen? You see these two little blades in that circle. The printed circuit board normally will send an information to one of the blades. It send an input to one of the blade, and the signal will come back when the wet clothing touches these blades. Because guys, you know, electricity is going through the non-pure water. So if the clothing are wet, the signal from the first blade goes back into the second one, and always you reset the time on the printed circuit board. That's why the machine will keep the system running until your clothing will get dry, because every time the clothing touch both blades, the electricity passes by and it goes from the first one to the second one and to reset the printed circuit board. That's why it's very important. They call fancy name, sensors, whatever. They two pieces of metal, but very well designed and polished, not cut your clothing. You'll find these two blades just behind the filter inside the cylinder where your clothing are. See, now the clothing are dry, and they not send it back the signal to the printed circuit board. And now the program know the clothing are dry because the electricity cannot pass by through dry clothing. Now there are a couple of faults you can develop. You'll see, if you have a dirty probe or if you have a power interrupted, the machine will believe the clothing are dry. Another type of fault you can have, sometimes you see on the left hand side down below, you have dirt onto the pump and the pump is clogged and you will run until it will blow up and you will never remove the moisture. That can be another fault. And let's look careful what other type of faults related to poor maintenance the system can develop. As you'll see now, the system run perfectly, but then you never clean the filters in front of the tumble dry filter. You never clean them. You see them on the right hand side, to the bottom and to the middle. One filter, it is inside where the clothing spinning, and one is in front of the evaporator. If you don't clean these filters, the air will not, the air quantity which circulates through the tumble dryer will be severely reduced. If you reduce this air, you see you don't even have water into the drip tray below, because there's not enough air to pass by, there's nothing to condense, and the condenser is cooling with this air, and now the condenser overheat itself. The pressure into the refrigeration system, it's exponentially increased, and then the compressor will run hours and hours and hours, because your clothing will never lose the moisture. And these two blades, you remember, on the right hand side on the top, it will always sense the humidity and will keep the system running until you will blow up the compressor. So see, simple as such, maintenance plays a very important role. You have to clean these filters all the time. And if you look now onto this system, how the air is circulating, this system loses the refrigerant. So when the system loses the refrigerant, the compressor run, but there's nothing inside the refrigeration system, the heat pump system. There's nothing in there. And the compressor run hours and hours and hours, and your clothing is still wet and wet and wet, and the compressor will overheat and will either cut on safety, it's got a bimetal blade, clicks in like a protective device, or you will burn in the end, because I know people reset a million times, and you know the heat from the compressor will be transferred to the clothing, and you'll always say, my clothing warm but still wet. Of course, because you don't have a refrigeration process. You're not removing the moisture from the clothing. You just circulate very hot and humid air, which is saturated. It cannot suck the moisture from your clothing. And what should you do technically? You look to the water tank, and then you look to the filter in front of the evaporator, which is below, normally in the left hand side. If you don't clean the filter in time, the dust will trespass into the evaporator, and you have to clean it with a vacuum cleaner. And then you have to check the other filter, which is inside. Now let's repeat a little bit this cycle. So I use a different type of picture, you understand better. You remove the lid, you see the HVAC system, it's enclosed into a box. The heat pump, it's enclosed, you can't see it. You see the motor, the compressor, and the pump, but inside you have the evaporator and the condenser. You remove the lid, and now I want you to see a little bit on 3D how it works. So let's repeat this. You circulate the air, yes, you remove the moisture, onto the blue painted heat exchanger. The water go down into the drip tray, and the pump in the left hand side remove the moisture, brings it up into your tank. So the air come warm and very moist, humid from the cylinder, goes to the evaporator. The evaporator cools the air but remove the moisture. The air is reheated by the condenser, and it goes back into the cylinder to remove more moisture from your clothing. If you have dust onto the drip tray, look to the left hand side. The water pump will run until it will blow up because you will not remove the moisture. Another fault can be developed, and that's not your fault. If you see on the right hand side where the fan is spinning, that bearing sits on a rubber ring, and that rubber ring is getting old, and the fan it's unbalanced and it starts touching the body of the machine, and that scroll could be damaged, or if in my case it welded with the machine's body because it was plastic, so I couldn't start. When I start the system, I could hear the motor buzzing, and I have to use a knife and to undo it and to change the ring. So I freed the fan to spin. This is what I believe you should know about these heat pumps, and I don't think they're very complicated. I know people write software and they put numbers and codes to look more interesting, but I think they're not fair with the customer. I think onto the display should be written exactly the fault, but then we live in a money society. Everybody want to make money, and I think they disconsider the customer, trying to look smart rather than helping the customer to have easy accessible errors information.